It's strange how some people only realize what they had after they've already thrown it away. And sometimes, life has a way of making sure they feel it. This is a story about love, sacrifice, and a betrayal so deep that it changed everything. But more than that, it's about karma. The kind that doesn't rush, doesn't warn you, but always arrives. There was a man named Armin. On the outside, his life looked perfect. A stable job, a beautiful home, and a child who adored him. But behind closed doors, things were not as simple as they seemed. Because the woman raising his child wasn't the one he chose to stay with. Her name was Saba. She wasn't the child's biological mother, but you would never be able to tell. From the moment she entered Armin's life, she stepped into a role most people would hesitate to accept. She took care of his little daughter like she was her own. Late nights, school mornings, sickness, laughter, Saba was there for all of it. She gave her time, her energy, and most importantly, her heart. At first, Armin appreciated her. He would thank her, smile at her, even tell his friends how lucky he was to have someone like Saba in his life. But over time, something shifted. The gratitude faded. The respect slowly disappeared. And the same woman who once meant everything started to feel invisible in her own home. Saba noticed it, of course. It's hard not to notice when someone starts pulling away. The conversations became shorter. The smiles became rare. And the warmth that once filled their home turned into silence. But she stayed. Not because it was easy, but because she loved that child with everything she had. Walking away would mean leaving behind the little girl who called her Amy, who ran into her arms after school, who depended on her for comfort. And then, there was someone else. Armin didn't plan it that way, at least that's what he told himself. It started with casual conversations, harmless meetings, and slowly turned into something more. The attention felt exciting. No. Different from the quiet, routine life he had with Saba. He convinced himself that he deserved happiness, that maybe he had settled too soon. But what he didn't realize was that happiness built on someone else's pain never lasts. When Saba found out, it didn't happen in a dramatic way. No shouting, no broken things. Just a quiet moment where everything suddenly made sense. The distance. The late nights. The empty promises. Her heart didn't shatter loudly, it broke in silence. And still, she didn't scream. She looked at Armin, the man she had stood by, the man whose child she had raised as her own, and all she asked was one simple question: was I ever enough for you? He didn't have an answer. Days later, Armin made his decision. He chose the other woman. Just like that. Years of loyalty, care, and love, replaced in a matter of moments. He walked away from Saba without truly understanding what he was leaving behind. But the hardest part wasn't for him. It was for the little girl. She didn't understand why the person who tucked her in every night suddenly wasn't there anymore. She didn't understand why her Amy stopped coming to school events or why her room felt emptier than before. And no matter how many times Armin tried to explain it, nothing made sense to her. Because love, real love, isn't something you can replace overnight. As for Saba, she left quietly. No revenge, no drama. Just a broken heart and memories she couldn't erase. She tried to rebuild her life, piece by piece, carrying the weight of everything she had lost. Meanwhile, Armin stepped into his new life. At first, it felt exciting. Fresh beginnings, new plans, a different kind of love. He believed he had made the right choice. That he had finally found what he was missing. But life has a way of testing those choices. Slowly, things began to change. The excitement faded. The connection he once felt didn't feel as strong anymore. And the peace he thought he would gain started slipping away. There were small signs at first. Arguments over little things. Misunderstandings that grew bigger than they should have. And a strange feeling that something wasn't right. At the same time, his daughter started changing too. She became quieter. Distant. The laughter that once filled the house wasn't there anymore. And no matter how much Armin tried to fix it, he couldn't bring back what was lost. Because deep down, she wasn't just missing someone. She was missing the person who truly loved her without conditions. And that's when it started to hit him. The memories of Saba. The way she cared. The way she never complained even when things were hard. The way she loved his child like her own, without asking for anything in return. For the first time, Armin began to wonder if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. But by then, it was already too late. Because somewhere far away from the life she once knew, Saba had started to change too. Not into someone bitter, but into someone stronger. Someone who had learned the hard way that love should never come at the cost of your self-worth. And just when Armin thought things couldn't get worse, life had one more surprise waiting for him. The kind of surprise that doesn't just hurt, but makes you face everything you've done. Because karma doesn't forget. And what came next was something Armin never saw coming. Weeks passed, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew heavier. Armin tried to distract himself with work, with his new relationship, with anything that would quiet the constant noise in his mind. But no matter what he did, there was always something missing. Something that used to be so natural, so effortless, that he never even noticed its value until it was gone. His daughter, Aina, was the first sign that things were truly changing. She stopped asking questions after a while, but that silence was worse. She no longer ran to greet him at the door. She no longer shared little stories about her day. Instead, she stayed in her room more often, holding on to old habits that reminded her of Saba. Sometimes Armin would find her sitting quietly, flipping through a photo on his phone, one where all three of them were together, smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. He didn't know what to say to her anymore. The woman he chose, Nisha, noticed it too. At first, she tried to be understanding. She told Armin that adjusting would take time, that children can be sensitive. But slowly her patience began to fade. She wasn't used to this kind of emotional distance, especially not from a child who barely spoke to her. "You need to do something," she said one evening, her voice calm but firm. "This can't go on forever." Armin nodded, but deep down he knew this wasn't something he could fix with a simple conversation. Because what Aina had lost wasn't just routine, it was a bond. A kind of love that doesn't come easily and once broken doesn't heal quickly. At night, when the house grew quiet, the weight of his choices felt even heavier. He would sit alone, replaying moments he had long ignored. Saba laughing in the kitchen. Saba helping Aina with her homework. Saba waiting for him even on days when he came home late without a word. Back then it all felt ordinary. Now it felt irreplaceable. But pride is a strange thing. Even when regret starts to grow, it doesn't always let you act on it. Armin thought about reaching out to Saba more than once. He would pick up his phone, scroll to her name, and then stop. What would he even say? How do you apologize for something that can't be undone? Meanwhile, Saba's life was moving in a completely different direction. The first few days after leaving were the hardest. The silence felt unfamiliar. The absence of Aina's voice, her laughter, her small daily needs, it all left a gap that nothing could fill. But Saba didn't allow herself to stay stuck in that pain for long. She had spent too much of her life putting others first. Now, for the first time, she had to learn how to stand on her own. She moved to a smaller place, simple but peaceful. No memories attached, no reminders waiting in every corner. It was a fresh start even if it didn't feel like one yet. What surprised her the most was herself. She thought she would break completely. That she wouldn't be able to function without the life she had built around Armin and Aina. But slowly she began to find strength in places she didn't know existed. She started focusing on things she had long ignored, her interests, her work, even her own happiness. Still, there were moments. Moments when she would see a little girl in the street and her heart would ache. Moments when she would instinctively reach for her phone, wanting to check if Aina had eaten, if she was okay, before remembering that she no longer had that place in her life. And yet, she never tried to go back. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally understood something important. Love without respect is not love that can survive. Back in Armin's house, the tension continued to grow. The cracks in his new relationship were becoming harder to ignore. Nisha was different from Saba in every way. She wasn't patient in the same way. She didn't understand Aina's silence, and she didn't try to hide her frustration anymore. "This isn't what I signed up for," she admitted one day, her words sharper than before. "I thought things would be easier." Easier. That word stayed with Armin long after the conversation ended. Because for a long time, that's exactly what he had wanted. Something easier, something less demanding, something that didn't require the kind of emotional effort Saba had quietly given every single day. But now he was starting to see the truth. The things that come easy don't always mean much. And the things that truly matter are often the ones we take for granted. As days turned into weeks, Armin began noticing small but painful details. Aina no longer called anyone Ami. She avoided conversations about the past. And whenever Saba's name came up, even by accident, she would quietly leave the room. It was as if a part of her had shut down completely. And that scared him. One evening, after a particularly tense day, Armin found himself sitting alone again, staring at his phone. This time he didn't scroll past her name. He stopped. His finger hovered over the call button, his heart beating faster than he expected. For a moment everything else faded, the noise, the stress, the confusion. All that remained was one simple thought. Maybe he needed to hear her voice. Maybe he needed to face what he had done. But just as he was about to press call, something unexpected happened. A notification popped up. It wasn't from Saba. It was from an unknown number. At first he ignored it. But when the phone buzzed again, something about it made him pause. A strange feeling, one he couldn't quite explain. Slowly he opened the message. And as he read the words on the screen, his expression changed. Confusion. Then disbelief. And then something deeper. Something that felt like the beginning of everything falling apart. Because the message wasn't ordinary. It carried a truth. One that connected directly to his past, his choices, and everything he thought he understood about his life. And in that moment, without even realizing it, Armin took his first step into the consequences he could no longer avoid. Armin read the message again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change if he gave it another chance. But it didn't. The words stayed the same, heavy and unsettling. Some truths don't disappear just because you walk away from them. There was no name, no explanation, nothing else. Just that one line. It didn't sound like a mistake. It felt personal. Too personal. For a moment he tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a wrong number, some random message sent by accident. But deep down he knew that wasn't the case. There was something about it, something that made his chest feel tight. He locked his phone and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His mind started racing, connecting things that didn't quite fit together yet. Was it about Saba? About Aina? About the choices he had made? Or was it something else entirely? The next morning, the message still hadn't left his thoughts. Even at work, he found himself distracted, missing details, losing focus. His colleague had to repeat a simple question twice before he realized someone was talking to him. "You okay?" the colleague asked, noticing the tension on his face. Armin forced a small nod. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. Meanwhile, at home, things were getting harder to ignore. Nisha had started becoming more distant, not in the quiet way Saba used to be, but in a more visible, restless way. She spent more time on her phone, more time out of the house, and less time trying to fix what was already slipping. Aina noticed it too. Children always do. One afternoon, while Armin was sitting with her, trying to get her to open up, she suddenly asked something he wasn't prepared for. Why do people leave when they promise they won't? The question hit him harder than anything else had so far. He looked at her, searching for the right words, but nothing came. Because any answer he gave would circle back to him, to what he had done. "They don't always mean to," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. Aina didn't respond. She just looked away, her expression unreadable. In that moment, Armin realized something painful. He wasn't just dealing with his own regret anymore. He was watching it affect someone else, someone who didn't deserve any of it. And still, the message lingered in his mind. Later that night, curiosity got the better of him. He opened the chat again and typed a simple reply. "Who is this?" He stared at the screen, waiting. Minutes passed. Then more. Just when he thought there would be no response, the phone buzzed. Someone who knows what you lost, and what you never understood. A chill ran through him. This wasn't random. This wasn't harmless. Whoever was on the other end knew something. Something deeper than just the surface of his situation. For the first time, a different kind of fear started to settle in, not loud or obvious but quiet and steady. At the same time, Saba was facing her own quiet battles. Her new life was stable on the outside. She had found a routine, a rhythm that kept her moving forward. But some nights were harder than others. Nights when the silence felt too loud, when memories found their way back no matter how much she tried to avoid them. One evening, while organizing her things, she came across a small drawing. It was something Aina had made months ago, a simple sketch of 3 people holding hands. Underneath, in uneven handwriting, it said, "My family." Saba sat there for a long time just looking at it. She didn't cry, but the weight of it stayed with her. At work, her colleagues had started noticing a change in her. Not sadness but strength. A quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. She spoke differently now, carried herself differently. It was as if she had finally stepped into a version of herself she had put aside for years. Still, there were questions she never asked out loud. Questions about whether Aina was okay. Whether Armin had realized anything. Whether any part of what they had shared still mattered. Back in Armin's world, the situation with Nisha reached a new level of tension. "What's going on with you?" she asked one evening, clearly frustrated. "You're distracted all the time. And now you're always on your phone." "It's nothing," he replied quickly. "It doesn't feel like nothing," she said. "It feels like you're somewhere else." He didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. He was somewhere else, stuck between the past he had walked away from and the present that didn't feel right anymore. And then there were the messages. They didn't stop. Each one came at random times, each one carrying the same tone, calm, knowing, almost like a reminder that something was coming. You thought it was over, but it never really ended. Some choices follow you longer than you expect. Not everything you lost is gone, and not everything you have is real. Armin tried to trace the number, tried to figure out who it could be. But nothing made sense. No name, no clear connection. Just a growing sense that this wasn't going to stop on its own. One night, unable to take it anymore, he stepped outside, dialing the number directly. Rang. Once. Twice. Then, it connected. But there was no voice on the other end. Just silence. Heavy, deliberate silence. Who is this? Armin demanded, his voice sharper now. For a few seconds nothing happened. And then, a faint sound. Not words. Just a soft breath. And then the call ended. Armin stood there, staring at his phone, his heart beating faster than it should have. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was something else. Something that was slowly pulling him back into everything he had tried to leave behind. And the worst part? It felt like this was only the beginning. After that call, something shifted inside Armin. It wasn't just confusion anymore, it was pressure. Like everything he had tried to ignore was slowly closing in on him from all sides. The messages, the silence on the call, the strange feeling that someone was watching his life from a distance. It all started to feel too real to dismiss. He barely slept that night. Every small sound felt louder than usual. Every thought felt heavier. And no matter how much he tried to calm himself, his mind kept going back to one question. Who knew this much about him? The next day he made a decision. He couldn't sit around waiting for another message. He needed answers. His first instinct was Saba. Not because he thought she was behind it, but because somehow, everything kept leading back to her. The memories, the regret, the life he had walked away from, it all pointed in the same direction. Maybe she knew something. Maybe there was something he had missed. He stared at her contact again, the same hesitation creeping in. But this time he didn't stop himself. He called. The phone rang longer than he expected. For a moment he thought she wouldn't pick up. But then, she did. There was a brief silence on the line. Hello? Her voice came, calm but distant. Armin felt his throat tighten. He had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was real, he didn't know where to start. Saba, it's me. Another pause. I know, she replied softly. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. And somehow that made it harder. I just wanted to ask if you're okay, he said, the words feeling awkward even to him. I'm fine, she answered. Simple. Controlled. He nodded even though she couldn't see him. That's good. I thought maybe we could talk. This time the silence lasted longer. About what, Armin? She asked. He opened his mouth, but the truth felt too complicated to explain. How do you tell someone that your life is unraveling and you don't even understand why? I've been getting messages, he said finally. From someone who seems to know things. About me. About the past. There was a shift on the other end. Subtle but real. What kind of things? She asked. Things about my choices, about what I lost, he replied, his voice lowering. It doesn't feel random, Saba. It feels like someone is trying to tell me something. For a moment she didn't respond. And then she said something that made his grip on the phone tighten. Maybe someone is. Armin frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she said carefully, sometimes life doesn't speak to you directly. It reminds you, in ways you can't ignore. Her words didn't give him answers. If anything, they made everything feel more uncertain. Saba, this isn't just a reminder, he insisted. This feels different. Like someone is involved. And what if it is? She asked quietly. What if it's something you need to face? The conversation wasn't going the way he expected. He had called looking for clarity, but instead he felt like he was being pushed deeper into something he didn't understand. Before he could say anything else, she spoke again. Armin, why now? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Why are you reaching out now? She asked. After everything. He didn't have a clean answer. Because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't just the messages. It wasn't just the fear. It was everything. I don't know, he admitted. Things just don't feel right anymore. On the other end, Saba closed her eyes for a moment. She could hear it in his voice, the uncertainty, the regret, the weight of everything catching up to him. But she also knew something else. Some things don't go back to the way they were. Not everything that feels wrong can be fixed, she said gently. Her words stayed with him long after the call ended. That evening, the tension in the house reached another breaking point. Nisha had been quiet all day, but it wasn't the calm kind of silence. It was the kind that builds up before something comes out. "Are you still thinking about her?" she asked suddenly. Armin looked up. "What?" "Saba," she said directly. "Are you still thinking about her?" The question hung in the air. He didn't answer right away. And that was answer enough. Nisha let out a small, bitter laugh. "I knew it. I could feel it. You're not really here, are you?" "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "Then what is it like?" she pressed. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm living in someone else's place." Her words hit harder than he expected. Because deep down, he knew she wasn't wrong. Before the argument could go further, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time he didn't hesitate. He opened it immediately. "Truth doesn't wait forever. Tonight, you'll understand." His heartbeat picked up. Tonight? What did that even mean? For the rest of the evening, everything felt off. The air in the house felt heavier. Even Aina seemed more restless than usual, as if she could sense something was about to happen. Hours passed. Nothing. And just when Armin started to think it was another empty message, there was a knock on the door. Sure. Unexpected. Everyone froze for a second. Armin stood up slowly, his mind racing. Something about the timing didn't feel like a coincidence. Another knock. This time louder. He walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind him, Nisha and Aina watched in silence. Armin reached for the handle. And for a brief moment, he hesitated. Because somehow, deep down, he felt it. Whatever was waiting on the other side of that door was about to change everything. That night should have felt like closure. The truth was out. The tension had softened. And for the first time in a long while, the house wasn't filled with confusion or silence. But something still didn't sit right with Armin. It was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that makes you feel like something is waiting just beneath the surface. Saba stayed longer than expected. She sat with Aina until she fell asleep, gently brushing her hair the same way she used to. From the doorway, Armin watched without interrupting. There was something about that moment that felt untouched by everything that had happened. Pure. Real. And it made everything else feel even heavier. When Saba finally stepped out of Aina's room, she found Armin standing there. "She missed you," he said quietly. Saba nodded. "I know." There was a pause, but not an uncomfortable one. "Thank you for staying," he added. "I didn't do it for you," she replied honestly. "I did it for her." He accepted that without argument. But before either of them could say anything more, Armin's phone buzzed again. The sound instantly broke whatever calm had settled. Both of them looked at it. Armin hesitated before picking it up. For a moment he thought it might finally stop now that everything had come out. But deep down he already knew it wouldn't be that simple. He opened the message. And the moment he read it, his expression changed. Saba noticed immediately. "What is it?" Armin didn't answer right away. He just handed her the phone. She read it silently. "Truth has layers. You've only seen the first one." A chill passed through both of them. "That doesn't make sense," Armin muttered. Everything was already explained. Saba looked at him, her expression tightening slightly. Was it? That question lingered. Because while a lot had been revealed, there were still gaps. Things that didn't fully connect. Small details that had been brushed over in the moment. Armin ran a hand over his face, frustrated. "Whoever this is, they're just trying to mess with me now." But his voice lacked certainty. Saba handed the phone back slowly. Or, they're not finished. That thought settled in heavily. Just when Armin felt like he could finally breathe, the pressure returned, stronger than before. "I need to end this," he said firmly. "How?" Saba asked. He didn't have an answer. The next morning, things took another unexpected turn. Aina woke up quieter than usual, but not in the distant way she had been before. There was something different now, like she was thinking about something she didn't know how to say. While Saba was helping her get ready, Aina suddenly spoke. "Can I ask something?" Saba smiled gently. "Of course." Aina hesitated for a second. "Why didn't you come back before?" The question was simple, but it carried so much weight. Saba paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes when people leave, it's not because they want to, it's because they have to figure things out." Aina looked down. "I thought you forgot me." Saba's expression softened deeply. "I could never do that." From across the room, Armin listened quietly. Every word felt like it was meant for him too. Later that day, while going through the documents again, something caught his attention. It was small. Almost unnoticeable. A name. Not his. Not Saba's. Someone else's. At first, he thought it was just part of the earlier confusion. But the more he looked at it, the more it stood out. Farid didn't explain this, he said, pointing at the page. Saba stepped closer. What is it? This name, Armin said. It shows up more than once. Saba leaned in, her expression slowly changing as she noticed it too. That's not a random detail, she said quietly. Armin's chest tightened. Then why didn't they mention it? Neither of them had an answer. But one thing became clear. Whatever truth had been revealed last night wasn't complete. And then, as if on cue, the phone buzzed again. Armin didn't even hesitate this time. He opened the message immediately. You're starting to see it now. His grip tightened. See what? He muttered under his breath. Another message came through almost instantly. The part they didn't tell you. The room felt colder. Saba looked at him, her voice lower now. This isn't just about the past anymore. No, Armin said slowly. This is about something that's still hidden. And suddenly, everything shifted again. What they thought was the truth might have only been a carefully controlled version of it. The involvement of someone else. Missing explanations. Messages that knew exactly where to push. It all pointed to something bigger. Something intentional. Armin stood up, his mind racing. I'm going to find Farid. Saba nodded. We need answers. But even as they said it, there was a growing feeling neither of them could ignore. What if the answers they were looking for weren't as simple as they hoped? What if the truth wasn't just hidden, but deliberately kept that way? As Armin reached for his keys, his phone buzzed one more time. He stopped. Slowly he looked down. And this time the message was different. Short, direct, and impossible to ignore. If you want the full truth, come alone. Armin's heart started pounding. Saba stepped closer. What does it say? He didn't respond immediately, because something about this message felt final. Like a line he couldn't uncross. He looked up at Saba, then back at the phone. And in that moment, he knew. Whatever came next would change everything all over again. Armin slowly opened the door, his hands slightly trembling without him realizing it. The moment the door moved, his breath caught in his chest. Standing there was Saba. For a second he thought he was imagining it, but she was real. Calm, composed, and standing right in front of him after everything that had happened. Behind her stood an older man Armin didn't recognize, and a woman holding a file in her hands. The air felt heavy, like something important was about to unfold. Saba? Armin said, confused. What's going on? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him with a steady expression, one that wasn't angry but wasn't soft either. It was the look of someone who had already made peace with something long ago. Can we come inside? She asked quietly. Armin stepped aside without thinking. As they entered, Nisha stood up from the couch, clearly surprised. Aina, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly froze the moment she saw Saba. For a second, everything else disappeared. Ami? Aina whispered. The word hung in the room like it had been waiting to be spoken for weeks. Saba's expression softened just a little, but she stayed where she was. Armin closed the door, his confusion growing. Saba, what is all this? Who are they? The older man stepped forward slightly. My name is Farid, he said calmly. And we're here because there are some things you need to understand. Armin frowned. Understand what? Before anyone could answer, his phone buzzed again. Another message. His hands felt cold as he opened it. This is where the truth meets you. He slowly looked up, his gaze moving from his phone to Saba. You, he said, his voice barely steady. Were you behind this? Saba shook her head gently. Not in the way you think. Farid stepped in again. The messages were sent on our advice, he explained. Because we knew you wouldn't listen otherwise. Armin's confusion turned into frustration. Listen to what? What is going on? The woman holding the file finally spoke. We've been looking into something connected to your past, she said. Something that affects more than just you. Armin felt his patience slipping. Can someone just say it clearly? There was a brief silence. Then Saba took a step forward. It's about Aina. Everything inside him went still. What about her? He asked quickly. Saba glanced at Farid, then back at Armin. A few months ago, I found some documents while organizing old papers. Things didn't match up. Dates, details. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Armin's heart started beating faster. But it wasn't, she continued. So I started asking questions. Quietly. Farid nodded. We helped her verify the information. Armin shook his head. Verify what? Saba's voice stayed calm, but her words carried weight. Aina's birth records. The room felt like it dropped into silence. That doesn't make any sense, Armin said quickly. I was there. I know everything about. No, Saba interrupted softly. You don't. That hit harder than anything else. Farid opened the file and handed it to Armin. You should read this. Armin took it with unsteady hands. As he flipped through the pages, his expression slowly changed. Confusion. Disbelief. Then something deeper. Because the records didn't match what he had always believed. Dates were off. Names were different. There were details that had never been explained to him before. This is wrong, he said, his voice shaking. This has to be wrong. It's not, Farid replied firmly. Armin looked at Saba, searching for something, anything, that would make this make sense. What are you saying? He asked. Saba held his gaze. I'm saying, there's a part of Aina's story you were never told. The words felt unreal. Behind them, Aina stood quietly, not fully understanding but sensing the tension. Nisha looked completely lost, caught in a situation she never expected to be part of. Armin ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. Why am I hearing this now? Why not before? Saba's answer came without hesitation. Because before. I didn't know either. That stopped him. All this time he thought he had been the one in control of his life. The one making decisions, choosing paths. But now, it felt like there had always been something hidden beneath the surface. And the messages? He asked slowly. Farid spoke again. We needed you to pay attention. To stop ignoring everything around you. Armin let out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. So this is karma, right? This is what all of this is about. Saba looked at him, her expression steady. No, she said softly. This is truth. The words settled into the room in a way that couldn't be ignored. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then suddenly Aina moved. She walked straight past everyone, and straight to Saba. Without saying anything, she hugged her tightly. Saba froze for a second, then slowly wrapped her arms around her. Armin watched it happen, something inside him cracking in a way he couldn't explain. Because in that moment, everything became painfully clear. The love he had walked away from. The bond he had underestimated. The life he had taken for granted. It wasn't just about losing Saba. It was about losing the truth of what really mattered. And just when it felt like everything had finally come into the open, Farid spoke again. There's one more thing. Armin looked up, exhausted. What now? Farid's expression turned serious. The records don't just raise questions, he said. They point to something bigger. Armin felt that same cold feeling return. What do you mean? Farid held his gaze. Aina's story isn't complete yet. The room went silent again. And just like that, even with everything revealed, it was clear. This wasn't the end. The silence after Farid's words felt heavier than anything that had come before. Armin stood there, still holding the file, but now it felt like it weighed far more than just paper. His mind was racing, trying to connect everything, trying to understand how his life had reached this point. What does that mean? Her story isn't complete? He asked, his voice lower now, almost tired. Farid didn't rush his answer. It means there were decisions made a long time ago, by people around you, that you were never fully told about. Aina came into your life in a way that wasn't as simple as you believed. Armin looked down at the papers again, then toward Aina, who was still holding on to Saba like she never wanted to let go. Are you saying, she's not my daughter? He asked, the question barely leaving his lips. Saba stepped forward before anyone else could answer. No, she said gently. That's not what this is. Armin looked up quickly. You are her father in every way that matters, she continued. But the truth is, there were complications when she was born. Things were handled quietly. Information was hidden. Even from you. Farid nodded. There were legal shortcuts taken and records that were altered to simplify things at the time. It wasn't meant to harm you, but it created a situation where you never saw the full picture. Armin let out a slow breath, trying to steady himself. So all this time, I've been living with a version of the truth. Yes, Saba said softly. And sometimes those versions catch up with us. For a moment, everything felt overwhelming. The messages, the tension, the guilt, the confusion, it all seemed to come together in one heavy realization. But then something shifted. Armin looked at Aina again. She wasn't focused on the documents. She wasn't thinking about records or hidden details. She was just a child, holding on to the one person who had always made her feel safe. And suddenly all the noise in his head became quieter. Does she need to know all of this? He asked, his voice more grounded now. Farid exchanged a glance with the woman beside him. Not right now, he said. What matters most is stability. Honesty can come with time. Armin nodded slowly. For the first time since everything started, he wasn't reacting out of fear or confusion. He was thinking clearly. Then we don't rush it, he said. We don't let this break her. Saba looked at him, surprised, but in a quiet way. That wasn't the Armin she had known before. Nisha, who had been silent for most of the conversation, finally spoke up. So, what happens now? It was a simple question, but it carried everything. Armin didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked a few steps closer to Aina and Saba. He didn't interrupt them, didn't try to pull Aina away. He just stood there watching. I made a lot of mistakes, he said finally. Not just with this, but with everything. His words were calm, but they carried weight. I thought I understood what mattered. I thought I could replace things, move on, build something easier. He shook his head slightly. But I was wrong. Saba didn't say anything, but she listened. Armin continued, I can't undo what I did. I can't go back and fix it. But I can choose what I do now. Nisha looked at him carefully. And what are you choosing? He took a deep breath. I'm choosing to be present. For her, he said, glancing at Aina. And I'm choosing to take responsibility, for my actions, for the truth, for everything I tried to ignore. There was no dramatic tone, no big declaration. Just honesty. And sometimes that's stronger. Nisha looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. There was no argument this time. No tension. Just a quiet acceptance that things weren't what she thought they would be. Saba gently pulled back from Aina, brushing her hair softly. You should go get some rest, she said to her. Aina hesitated. Will you stay? Saba looked at Armin for a brief second. He nodded. Yes, she said gently. I'll stay for a while. That was enough. As Aina walked to her room, the house felt different. Not fixed, not perfect, but calmer. Farid and the others prepared to leave, their role now complete. Before stepping out, he turned to Armin. Truth has a way of finding its place, he said. What you do with it, that's what defines you. Armin nodded, understanding that more than ever now. When the door closed behind them, only Armin and Saba remained in the quiet living room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Armin said, I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not another chance. Nothing. Saba looked at him, her expression steady. But I needed to say this, he continued. You didn't deserve what I did. And I didn't understand your value until I lost it. There was no excuse in his voice. Just truth. Saba took a small breath. Some things don't go back to how they were, she said. I know, he replied. But that doesn't mean everything is lost, she added. Those words stayed between them, quiet but meaningful. Because this wasn't a story about everything going back to normal. It was about growth. About realizing that love isn't just about being there when it's easy, but staying when it's hard. About understanding that the people who quietly support you are often the ones you can't replace. And most of all, it was about karma. Not as punishment, but as a mirror. Armin didn't lose everything overnight. He lost it slowly, by not seeing its value. And in the end, karma didn't come to destroy him. It came to make him see. And sometimes, that's the hardest lesson of all.